Mhm.
You can begin, Alderman Balmer.
All right, thank you very much. We will call the legislative committee meeting together to order. Mr. Clerk, I almost said Sharita. Mr. Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderman Boyd,
Present.
Alderwoman Davis, Alderman,
H-A-H-L-E-R.
somebody needs to mute. There we go.
Please.
Alderwoman Davis, Alderman Vaccaro, Alderman Kotar,
Here.
Alderman Kotar,
Oh.
Alderwoman Boyd, Alderwoman Boyd. You have to unmute. Alderwoman Boyd. Okay.
Here.
Alderman Muhammad,
Here.
Alderman Oldenburg, Alderwoman Martin,
Here.
Alderwoman Navarro,
Present.
Alderwoman Middlebrook,
Present.
Alderwoman Clark Hubbard,
Here.
Chairman Vollmer,
Present.
President Reed,
Here.
Alderwoman Davis, Alderman Vaccaro, Alderman Coulter. Okay. Alderman Oldenburg, you have 9 present, a quorum is present.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. With that, we will move down the agenda. We'll move for approval of the minutes from September 28th, 2021. I'll have a motion.
So
Mr.
moved.
To approve the minutes from September 19th, 2021.
Second.
Second.
So it would
Okay.
be September 28th.
September 28th.
28th. I just wanted to beat the president. That's all.
All right.
Oh my goodness.
Okay. With that, we'll take a roll call vote on the minutes. Thank you, sir.
Alderman Boyd,
Aye.
Alderwoman Davis, Alderman Vaccaro, Alderman Kotar, Alderwoman Boyd,
Aye.
Alderman Muhammad,
Aye.
Alderman Oldenburg, Alderwoman Martin,
Aye.
Alderwoman Navarro,
Aye.
Alderwoman Middlebrook,
Aye.
Alderwoman Clark Hubbard,
Aye.
Chairman Vollmer,
Aye.
President Reed,
Aye.
Alderwoman Davis, Alderman Vaccaro, Alderman Kotar, Alderman Oldenburg. You have 9 aye votes.
Thank you. With that, we've approved the motion of the Alderman from the 21st. We approved the minutes from September 28th. We will now we'll hold excused Alderman until the end of the meeting. We'll now proceed with Board Bill 101, our continuing redistricting discussion. Again, today, I believe the Maptitude software is getting set up. We will be going over that probably next week. We have a presentation from the president today. But first, I'd like to get an update. Alderwoman Navarro, you and Alderwoman Martin were looking into the personnel situation. Have you things going okay with that?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, we've had some good conversations in addition to talking with several different aldermen just to get a sense of the capacity that we could use. And then also talking with personnel, director of personnel a little bit about what would happen in terms of salary and the mechanisms there. And then I've also talked to the budget director about a possible fiscal note. So we are waiting to get some data back in terms of what comparable cities to us do in terms of salary and staffing, and not just looking at size, but also looking at the role of their legislators, because we tend to do a lot of constituent services, I think more so than other municipalities. So I hope in the next week or so to have some more information so that we can come up with a proposal that will make sense for our city, given the needs that we have.
Okay, have we found, are there any cities in our similar situation recently who have actually dropped their council members or board members in half or a third, or?
So we haven't been able to find really great data. There's a lot of cities that have been considering that. But that's going to be part of the survey as well. I did specifically ask them to look into cities that have adjusted recently as well.
Okay. And Alderwoman Davis is asked to assist the two of you in this endeavor. So if you would reach out to her, and we'll, sometimes the more the merrier. So I appreciate that. Does Alderwoman Martin, you have anything to add? Looks like you're driving, so be careful.
Luckily, I'm in the passenger seat.
Okay.
But I do not have anything to add. I think that was
I appreciate it very
covered
much.
all. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Alderman Boyd, you were going to look into our, the strong neighborhoods and neighborhood associations. How's that going?
It's going slow. I need to follow back up with my colleagues. Actually, I'm sending an email to the clerk now to resend out. I think who I picked up what I thought was a group, and it doesn't look like many members of that group received that email. So,
all right. Okay. Well, we'll hold off that until next week then. Thank you very much. With that, we'll proceed to Mr. President. You have a presentation for today as co-sponsor? All right.
Yes, I just want to, if you remember, Mr. Chairman, part of what we were going to do today was to begin to just review some of the data so that we all are playing off the same sheet of music. So what we're going to review today is some of the data from 2010 and also the latest census in 2020. We will review neighborhood data. We're going to take a look at some demographic data and also ward-based data. We also have reached out to the National Association of Counties and have received just a treasure trove of information from them that we will review, not at this meeting, but at a later meeting. I don't think we'll have time to get into all that today. We will also, if members of the committee would like us to send copies of it, we can send you copies of that also. So with that, Thomas Shepard from our office will begin the presentation.
Good morning, members of the committee. I have some spreadsheets. I'm going to share my screen, and what I'll be going over is just some of the detail that we looked at from the new census numbers as far as population on a citywide basis, a ward basis, and a neighborhood basis. So let me share the screen. Okay, can everyone see the screen?
Yes, I can.
Yes.
Okay, this is so this first tab on this worksheet is just a snapshot of the total population, the change based on racial demographics. Let me get this out of my way. I got to the point where I have to take my glasses off to see up close now, so I'll take my glasses off. So what we're looking at now is total population on this spreadsheet, if you see at the top here, and it gives a list of demographic data as people identify themselves in this latest census. Column D is 2010 numbers. Shouldn't be a comma in there, but column E is 2020 numbers, and column F is the number change. Column G is the percentage change, and column H gives a percentage of their racial demographic of the total population for 2010, and column I gives that same percentage of the total population for 2020. So as we know, total population decreased from 319,000 to 301,000, but almost 18,000 person decrease, a 5.5% decrease in population. For those who identify in the census as their race as white alone, that number decreased from 140,000 to 132,000. So a change of about 8,000, a decrease of 5.5%, pretty similar to the overall decrease in the population of the city. And the percentage of people of the total population of the city that identified as white alone remained constant at 44% between 2010 and 2020. For those identified as African American alone, the population decreased from 157,000 to 129,000, a decrease of 27,000 people, 17.5% decrease. And as a percentage of the total population of the city, African Americans decreased from 49% in 2010 to 43% in 2020. Another demographic identified, not a large demographic of the city, is American Indian / Alaska Native. And that population increased from 838 to 948, about a 13% increase. Again, not a large percentage of the entire population, less than a 0.5% of the total population comes from this demographic. Those who identified as Asian alone, this population increased by almost a third. This population increased from 9,200 to 12, or from 9,300 to 12,300. That population went from making up 3% of the total population of the city to 4%. So still a small demographic, but there was a large increase within the demographic. Same type of increase within those who identified as Native Hawaiian or Pacific Islander, but similar to American Natives, Alaska Natives and American Indians, very small percentage of the total population of the city. Now those were individuals who identified as one race. There was also a group that identified as one race, but not one of the races listed above. That amount increased from 412 people in 2010 to 7,700 people in 2020. So almost 2,000% increase in individuals who identified as one race other than the races listed above. And they make up about 2.5% of the total population of the city. Also, there was those who identified as two or more races. That part of the population increased by almost 150%, from 7,500 to 18,000. And that group makes up about 6% of the city's total population. Below that, I have just broke it down a little more for individuals that identified as two races. And as we see it across the board, those demographics increased from 2020 to 2010, except for those in line 20 that identified as African American and Hawaiian or Pacific Islander. But all these other numbers of those who identified as two or more races increased. That's total population. The next tab is 18 years and over. 18 years and over, population 18 years and over in the city decreased by 4,000 from 251,000 in 2010 to 247,000. Those who identified as white, that number decreased by 4,600 from 122,000 to 118,000. For African Americans, that number decreased by 14,000 from 113,000 to 99,000. So, these are net numbers, of course. So, there may have been plenty of more people that left the city that were white or African American, but we have, people that have moved in. So these, of course, are net numbers. But so if you look at the total population decrease of 7,900 for white alone, 18 years and over, that population decrease was 4,600. That means you had, population decrease in children of 3,000, and about that's for African Americans. The total decrease was 27,000, and 14,000 were from 18 and over. So that means about 13,000 children, a decrease in 13,000 children. The Asian population, 18 and over, actually increased from 7,800 to 11,000. And just some other citywide data as far as dealing with population and how we increase population or the challenges. Looking at housing units. Housing units decreased by 2,500 from 2010 to 2020. Occupied housing units, it looks like, increased, and vacant housing units decreased by 5,000. And again, these are net numbers. So, you get people moving in, people moving out, places being built. Some places may have been built since 2010 and are already vacant. So these are all just net numbers. And I'm going to move on and look at some of the ward changes. And so on this spreadsheet, you got 4 columns: ward number, 2011 total or 2010 total. It's the 2011 redistricting number. 2020 total from the census and the change. And I've got them sorted by the amount of population lost. So I'll just go over the top 5 that that lost the most.
Tom, I don't see, it's still on total population on our.
Oh, is it still on that screen? Okay,
Yeah.
Let me go back. Let's do this thing. Let me stop the share. And I'll start again.
There it is. Yeah, we can see it.
You can see it now?
Yes.
Okay, great. Sorry about that. So on this tab in this spreadsheet, this is just the totals for the wards. Difference between the last census and the last redistricting, what the numbers were in that ward and what the amounts were in those same geographic boundaries in this census. So, and I'll just go over, I got them sorted by who lost the most, which ward rather lost the most, and which ward gained the most in population. And I'll just do the top 5 in each of those. So if you look at Ward 2, lost 3,200 people. Ward 3 lost 3,000 people. Ward 4 lost 2,800 people. Ward 27 lost 2,700 people. Ward 1 lost 2,500 people from 2010 to 2020. And, you know, the only wards that lost over 1,000 people were in North St. Louis. And then if you look down at the bottom, reading from the bottom up, the wards that gained the most in population, you had the 17th ward, which gained 3,000 people. The 7th ward gained 2,700 people. The 28th ward gained 1,000 people. The 19th ward gained 400, and the 6th ward gained 285 people. So of course, you know, from the total numbers, it makes sense that most of the wards lost population. So those are the, you know, changes in the wards. Also, you know, I know neighborhoods have been an important part of the discussion and will be for redistricting. So I wanted to go over with the committee, just show them the change in population in some of the neighborhoods within the city of St. Louis. And again, I sorted this, you know, the top 1 listed lost the most in population, and the ones at the bottom gained population. So the Baton neighborhood in that 10-year period lost 1,800 people. Graterville lost 1,600 people. O'Fallon lost 1,400 people. Wells Goodfellow lost 1,400 people, and Walnut Park lost basically 1,400 people. And so again, these are total numbers. Some of these neighborhoods are much bigger than others, so it's not a great reflection of the percentage. You know, the percentage loss, which I'll go over a little later, but this is just giving you the raw total number of people in each neighborhood that were lost. But again, you know, some neighborhoods have over 10,000 people. Some neighborhoods only have a couple thousand. So this doesn't give you a great idea of the entire impact on that neighborhood, but just wanted to give you the total numbers as well. And later on, I'll go over the percentages. If you scroll down to the bottom, the neighborhoods that gained the most in population, Central West End gained 2,200, downtown gained 1,700, Midtown gained 1,200, downtown West gained 1,100, and Cheltenham gained 640 residents. And just, you know, and I'll just talk about the percentage for Cheltenham, just to give an idea of what I mean. You know, some of these neighborhoods are much bigger than others, and this doesn't necessarily give a clear picture, but you know, Cheltenham, the neighborhood gained 640 people, but it pretty much doubled from 2010. So the total population is only 1,200 or so. So that was 100% increase, and the Central West End neighborhood has gained more, but is a much larger neighborhood. So percentage-wise, it didn't grow as much as the Cheltenham neighborhood. Also went and looked at the racial demographics changes in this next tab within the neighborhoods. So you see column A is neighborhood name, column B is total population change. Column C is the population change, white, those who identified as white alone. Column D is the population change of those who identified as African American alone. Move this out of my way. Column E is Asian American alone, and so on and so forth. And I have this sorted on this tab based off white alone demographic. So this would be similar to the other ones, the top 5. I'll go over the top 5, but these will be the neighborhoods that lost the most in those who identified as white alone. The Bevo Mill neighborhood had 2,400 less people that identified as white alone. Carondelet neighborhood at 1,600 fewer people. The Dutchtown neighborhood at 1,600 fewer people that identified as white alone. Boulevard Heights had 1,300 fewer people that identified as white alone, and Princeton Heights had about 1,000 people that identified as white alone. And if you look at some of these other columns for African American alone and Asian alone, you'll see that those numbers in some of these increase. So that means those neighborhoods are becoming more integrated and more diverse. And if you scroll, I'm going down to the bottom now, and I should have kept this where my headings was tailing me. So column C is the column that we're looking at. If you look towards the bottom, for those who identified as white alone, the Central West End gained 1,000 people who identified as white alone. The Shaw neighborhood gained 1,000 people who identified as white alone. Forest Park Southeast gained 700 people who identified as white alone. Tower Grove East gained 500 people who identified as white alone, and Cheltenham gained 400. And if you look to the right, column D, that's the change in the African American population, which, you know, well, there's some other tabs that go over that a little bit more, but as you can see, these numbers are going the opposite direction in some of the neighborhoods that I mentioned earlier up top that were getting more diverse. These are going very much in the opposite direction, with Tower Grove East increased the white alone population by 500, and African American population decreased by 900. The Shaw neighborhood is pretty stark change there. 1,000 additional citizens who identified as white on the census, and 1,300 less African Americans who identified themselves as such in this census. So Central West End as well, even though it's a much bigger neighborhood. But so again, these are raw numbers, not percentage, but you can see there are some neighborhoods that are going in the opposite direction of diversity. And so that's some further detail on the neighborhoods and the racial demographics. This next tab, similar to the other tab, but it is sorted by the African American population in the neighborhoods and how many were lost. If you look at the top 5, Greaterville, Dayton, Jeff Vanderloo, Wells Goodfellow, O'Fallon, they all lost, over 1,500 African American residents. And these are all predominantly African-American neighborhoods in North St. Louis. Scroll down to the bottom. Let's look and see which neighborhoods gained in African-American population. And that would be downtown has gained 1,000 African-Americans. Midtown gained 900 African-Americans. Bevo Mill gained 700 African-Americans. Downtown West gained 600, and the Patch gained 273. And again, if you look at, like I mentioned with Bevo Mill and even and now I see the Patch and Midtown, these neighborhoods are increasing in African-American population and decreasing in white population, but these are still majority white neighborhoods, I'm pretty sure, for the Patch as well. And so that means that they're becoming more diverse than they were 10 years ago. This next tab kind of gives another picture of this demographic shift that I've been talking about in the last two tabs. It kind of gives the overall change, if there was a big change in those who identified as white alone and those who identified as Black alone within the neighborhood, just to kind of get an idea of how much the neighborhood changed, to kind of quantify that. So if you look at the delta, the change, when you combined in Bevo Mill, there was 2,400 fewer white residents and 700 more African-American residents. I just tried to quantify that to try to get an idea that how that shift, or how big that shift was. And so if you take the difference between the two, one going down and one going up, it's a 3,100 person difference. So it was a big shift in that neighborhood. Carondelet, not so much a shift as Bevo Mill with the increase and decrease, but it did gain an African-American population and lose a substantial amount of its white population. So these are just further details that were being looked at just to kind of get an idea of the demographic shift within some of these neighborhoods. That's it. So this next tab that we're looking at now, and again, we've had part of this discussion will be, involve keeping these neighborhoods together. And so I wanted to just look at the numbers on a percentage basis of some of our neighborhoods here in the city, just to see how they fared over the last 10 years. And I've sorted this list by the greatest decrease in population of a neighborhood. So if you look at the North Riverfront neighborhood, has a current 2020 population of 154 people. That neighborhood lost 783 people. So that neighborhood had 930 in 2010, and now it's at 154. So that neighborhood lost 83% of its population in the last 10 years. If you look at line 4, the Fairground neighborhood's total population now is 1,157. Fairground neighborhood lost 636 people. And that was a 35% decrease in population. So the Fairground neighborhood lost 35% of its population College Hill lost 33% of its population. Walnut Park East lost 33% of its population. And, the list goes on. And again, most of these are in, as the board numbers showed as well, most of these are in North St. Louis that lost population. And then you have, some of these neighborhoods that increased in population. Cheltenham, as I mentioned earlier, their population increased by 100%. Downtown's population increased by 46%. Downtown West neighborhood's population increased by 30%. Midtown increased by 20%, and the Vandeventer neighborhood increased by 21%. So that's a look at just on a percentage basis to give an idea of how some of these neighborhoods fared as far as population growth or loss in the last 10 years. The biggest population loss in the city was of African Americans, and this next tab just goes over the, this percentage, it takes the current population, and as a percentage of the current population, how many African Americans were lost in that neighborhood over the past 10 years of the current population. Not how many were lost from 2010, but if you take the number lost as a percentage of the current population, what that looks like. So if you take the North Riverfront's current population, the amount of African American citizens lost in that neighborhood in the last 10 years is 400% of the current population. If you take the Fairground neighborhood, the percentage decrease, the amount of African Americans that were lost in that neighborhood in the past 10 years as a percentage of the current population is 56%. 50% for Walnut Park East, 47% for College Hill. If you scroll down on the these are all decreases in population. And so all of these neighborhoods listed had a decrease in African American population. Some, over 50% decrease. This next tab is neighborhoods that gained in African American population. I think this is some data we've gone over already. This should have a percentage here, but it doesn't, but I can kind of just wing it. Downtown saw an increase. When you take their current population, the increase in the African American population is about 20% of the current population. Midtown, you're looking at about 17% of the increase in African Americans is about 17% of the current population. If you look at Bevo Mill, you've got about 7 or 8%, 7% or 6% of the current population. That's how much African American population increased. So these neighborhoods past downtown West, Bevo Mill, Midtown, downtown saw a increase in African American population. I will move on. Let me move on to this. Next tab is just neighborhoods and neighborhood growth. Which neighborhoods grew the most? The top 5 neighborhoods that grew the most, and this is by percentage, not by number of people. So Cheltenham increased by 100% the past 10 years. Downtown increased by 46%. Downtown West increased by 30%. Midtown increased by 21%. And Vandeventer increased by 21%. And these, again, these are just neighborhoods that gained in population. So there was 24 neighborhoods that gained in population. Next tab shows the 50 or so neighborhoods that lost in population and who lost the most per percentage. North Riverfront lost 83% of its population. Fairground neighborhood lost 35% of its population. College Hill lost 33% of its population. Walnut Park East lost 33% of its population. And Mark Twain neighborhood lost 30% of its population. Again, all of the 50 or so of these neighborhoods, 54, I think it is, lost population in the past 10 years. This next spreadsheet shows the change in the, on percentage basis, percentage-wise, the change in the African-American community, African-American population within that neighborhood. So some of them with the large, if you look at column J, the change in African-American population, you know, the change from 2010 to 2020 of 92% for North Riverfront, which is predominantly African-American neighborhood. So that makes sense that all the loss would be, a majority of it would be African-American. Now the Shaw neighborhood is a little different. So the Shaw neighborhood, you know, which is, you know, concerning, I'll just say, or you know, interesting. The Shaw neighborhood, although it gained in population, it had a 47% decrease in the African-American population. Even though it saw an increase in population overall, and the white population in the Shaw neighborhood saw, I don't know, about a 30% increase, and the African-American population showed a 47% decrease in population. So that's kind of stark, and that is, you know, I think that's a interesting data point as we look at some of these neighborhoods. Going down the list further, as far as, you know, neighborhoods that lost the biggest percentage of African-American residents, you got Penrose Park Fairgrounds. You got the Tiffany neighborhood lost overall population and lost 35% of its African-American residents. Tower Grove East is, I believe, another one where the African-American population decreased by more than a third, and it's like and the white alone, those who identified as white, that the population increased by 20%. So that's another, that along with the Shaw, by the percentages, they're going kind of in the opposite direction of diversity, at least as far as the two larger population groups of the city. So, again, that's another data point I think we all need to probably should pay some attention to. The other neighborhoods on this list, Walnut Park, near North Riverfront, College Hill, all of them are North St. Louis ward, so it would make sense that their population decrease would be, most of the population loss would be of African Americans. Tower Grove South is another interesting case. Line 17 on this tab, Tower Grove South, the population, 30% decrease in the African American population, and looks like those identified as white, those who identified as African American, that population decreased by 30%. The population of those identified as white stayed the same. So again, that's another neighborhood in the city that's actually going in the opposite direction when it comes to diversity, among the two, again, largest groups of two largest racial groups in the city. I don't think I think it was just those three, Tower Grove East, Shaw, and Tower Grove South, that saw that kind of dynamic at play, where it was a substantial decrease in the African American community and either stable or substantial increase in white residents within that community. So that's interesting data, I think. So earlier I talked about, why it was, better to look at percentages with some of this stuff, because the neighborhoods the size of the neighborhoods vary greatly. And so this is just a tab that outlines that. Central West End is the biggest neighborhood in population in the city. The Central West End neighborhood has 16,000 people, Dutchtown neighborhood 15. Tower Grove South has 12,000, Bevo Mill 12,000, and Lindenwood Park has 9,000 people in their neighborhood. And some of the smaller neighborhoods, just to contrast that, just to show the importance of dealing with percentages, and not just raw numbers. Sometimes when you're looking at these neighborhoods, some of them are very small, 50 and under, 200 and under, but then you have some, Riverview's 242, near North Riverfront's 395 people, Mark Twain's 902 people, Tiffany neighborhood's 915, Visitation Park 900. I mean, they're all under 1,000. And then you have other neighborhoods that, again, have 16,000 residents. And here's another, data point that may have, maybe good information. This is on a neighborhood basis. This just looks, kind of gives a snapshot of the change in occupied housing units, total housing units, and vacant housing units within a neighborhood. So you look at a neighborhood like the Greaterville, total population change in column C was 1,644 people. also lost on a net basis 600 housing units. So, what role does the loss in housing units play in trying to replenish the population of that neighborhood? Same, Wells Goodfellow lost 1,400 people and, lost 800 housing units. So it looks like neighborhoods like that are, in order to gain population, it appears are going to need some new development. And so, but that's just something for future thinking, not necessarily, I guess, for this process. And then you look down below at the bottom, you've got some neighborhoods that gained a substantial amount of housing units. Central West End, 1,400, downtown, 1,100, Midtown, almost 500, Cheltenham, Forest Park Southeast both gained over 500 housing units since the last census. And I have one more sheet that I think may have some information I didn't cover. Take a look at that. So on this sheet, this is just some other things of note. As I talked about at the beginning, the total white population loss from 2010 to 2020 was 7,900. This data here shows that basically 90% of that loss came from 4 neighborhoods: Bevo Mill, Carondelet, Dutchtown, and Boulevard Heights. There were some neighborhoods that lost white population over 100, but gained an overall population: Patch, St. Louis Hills, Midtown. And I think these neighborhoods were majority white, and probably, I'm assuming still are majority white population. So that shows that they're getting more diverse. Neighborhoods that lost white population and overall population and increased in African American population. So these would be neighborhoods that are getting even more diverse than the ones listed before. And that was Bevo Mill, Carondelet, Boulevard Heights, Princeton Heights, Lindenwood Park, and Holly Hills. So then we have neighborhoods that increased in white population and overall population, and decreased in African American population. So the top of that list is the Shaw neighborhood, as far as numbers are concerned. It's probably a pretty big percentage of that neighborhood as well. Then you have the West End neighborhood, Forest Park Southeast, Central West End. But the Central West End is a huge neighborhood, so percentage-wise, it's not a big a change as in the Shaw neighborhood. You have Botanical Heights, Peabody, Darth Wedby, and Southwest Garden. And again, these are all neighborhoods that increased in overall population and decreased in African American population, and increased in white population. So they're becoming a little less diverse. And then we have this last one is neighborhoods with the greatest number shift between African American to white, where white total population increased. So these are neighborhoods where the white total population increased, African American population decreased, and the biggest, the 5 that had the biggest contrast between those two. At the top was the Shaw neighborhood. If you take the increase in white population and the decrease in the African American population, that was 2,300 people I think that's probably a nice percentage of the total population in the neighborhood. So that's pretty stark. The Central West End was next. Again, probably not so great a percentage of the neighborhood, but still a large number. Tower Grove East, another large number of that contrast and an increase in white population, decrease in Black population. Forest Park Southeast, same thing. And then Tower Grove South it is also in that top 5 where you have that contrast of, one population increasing and the other population decreasing by a lot. And so that's just that we give an overview of some of the details on some of this population loss and population shift within the city, just so we have a little clearer, a little more nuanced and detailed view of what's gone on in the last 10 years. And I'll go back to you, President Reed.
Right, thank you, Tom. Mr. Chairman, this gives a overview of where we currently are, how we, what some of the population trends look like coming from 2010 through the 2020 census. And there's one more quick overview I'm going to have Mary do real quick, if she'll share her screen, that just shows just some other economic data and some things of that nature that are kind of interesting.
Please proceed.
Thank you. Mary?
Yes, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Cool. So this is on the US Census website, and it gives kind of just a quick breakdown of St. Louis City. Our total population is 301,578. The median household income is 47,176. Our bachelor's degree percentage is 38.6%. Employment rate, 62.4%. Total housing units, 173,000. Without healthcare coverage is 10.5%. And the percentage of Hispanic or Latino is 15,405. Did you want me to continue on this page? Or?
Just cover the what the average age and sex and a couple of those things, and then
okay. The median age for people in the city of St. Louis is 36, and the median age in Missouri is 38. Looks like only 13% of our population is 65 years of age or older. Gives you information on the ancestry. %90 of our residents are English only speaking, 3% Spanish speaking, 6% speak a language outside of English. Foreign-born population in the city of St. Louis, naturalized U.S. citizen 43.6%, and not a U.S. citizen 56.4%.
And if you just do the age real quick, I think that'll cover it.
Okay. Older population by age in the city of St. Louis, 65 to 74, 7.9%, 75 to 84, 3.7%, and then 85 or older, 1.6%. 14.4% is 65 or older.
Do one more, do the mobility. I think this is really important to note, and then I think that'll wrap it up.
Residential mobility in the last year in the city of St. Louis, 2.9% moved from a different state in the last year to St. Louis City. 9.2% moved within the same county. 4.6% moved from a different county, same state. 3.8% moved from a different state, and 0.8% moved from abroad.
Thank you. And thank you, Mary. Mr. Chairman, so what we, as we discussed, what we wanted to achieve in this meeting was to just get everybody on the same sheet of music and begin to get us to take a look at some of the data. And as you already covered, next week we will have an opportunity to look at all of this data, but through the system that we'll have, possession of next week. And that concludes everything that we were covering today.
All right, thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Thomas. Thank you, Mary. I believe a lot of that information is available to all of us. I know I've printed some of it off and have it, but could we make sure that every alderman has gotten the copies of those spreadsheets and things that Thomas and Mary have today? Not just the members of the committee, but all the members of the board.
Absolutely.
Okay.
We'll get it to the clerk and then have the clerk send it out to everyone.
Okay, because I would like everyone to have all that at their fingertips, so we're all, as you say, playing the same tune. Okay, with that, I'm going to go around. I see a hand up or two, but I want to go around. I'll go by seniority through the committee, see if we have any questions or anything before we wrap up today's information, and we'll get into the nuts and bolts of this next week. Also, I know there's some questions about public meetings. We've been working with the vice chair, Mr. Alderman Boyd, if we're going to set some up, especially in the evening. My evenings are very tough because of my employment, but he will be handling some public meetings probably in the future. For those of you who are watching and are not members of the board, we are just going to set these things up. So with that, I will start. Alderman Boyd, any questions?
No questions. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, thank you. Alderman Davis, are you with us? All right, Alderman Vaccaro. I believe
They're at the other meeting.
Are you familiar at all with?
Hello,
I
please mute yourself. Thank you. Alderman Vaccaro is probably still in public safety, if I had to guess. Right?
incorporated or unincorporated areas.
Okay, thank you. Please mute. Alderman Kodar, not with us. All right. Alderman Pam Boyd, you have your hand up, so please proceed.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chair. Wait a minute, hold on. Let me mute you on one and get to the other one.
Can someone mute, please? We have a.
I'm muted, Mr. Chair. I'm
Okay.
at 2 meetings. And so what my question was, at the beginning of the meeting, we talked about two subcommittees.
Yes.
And I said, well, did I miss a meeting or something? Because I was trying to find out who sat on these committees and how they came about.
What happened was I assigned homework basically because Alderwoman Martin and Alderwoman Navarro had brought up the personnel discussion at last week's meeting. After the meeting, I contacted them and asked them to look into it. And Alderwoman Davis has asked to assist them. Alderman Boyd brought neighborhoods up. So what happens is, like my old teachers to do at school, if you bring the question up, I'll assign you, put you in charge of that item. If you'd like to help either one of those two, please let me know and we'll let you help out. But Jeffrey Boyd.
You fine. I just wanted to know how not to be, picked for something. So, okay. Thank you, Chair.
You're welcome. You're welcome. All right. With that, Alderman Muhammad, any questions or comments? Not with
No
us.
questions. No questions,
All
Mr.
right.
Chairman. Thank you, Mr. President and Mr. Shepherd, for the presentation. It was very informative and insightful. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you, sir. Alderman Oldenburg, I believe, is not with us. Alderman Martin, she probably had to leave. She was on the road. She let me know that about 15 minutes ago she left. Alderman Navarro, any questions or comments?
Thank you. I just have one question, either for the president or maybe it's for Tom. When you start using the Maptitude software, does that automatically generate wards, or what sort of criteria are you putting in there in terms of, the population, the neighborhood lines, that sort of thing? What can you tell us about what you're feeding into the program?
I'll take that one. So the data comes directly from the Census Bureau through Caliper into the system. So we don't really have to load it. It comes packaged into the mapping software with all the demographic data and everything that comes with it. We can choose to do like test maps where we say, okay, draw a map that is that divides the wards up where we have at least 50 population in terms of African American or minority population, white population, and it'll draw something for you, right? But then we could take that as a basis and begin moving forward, or we can choose to just draw our own maps based on the data that we receive with all the block data that comes with it.
Thank you. So what so neighborhood maps, for example, is that also going to be part of there? Will the mapping software be able to look at neighborhood?
Oh yeah.
maps as
Oh,
well?
absolutely. Absolutely. It does everything. We do neighborhoods. We can look at fire districts. We could look at, every single thing. I mean, if we were a larger county, school districts would matter. So they have, all of the block data in there for every single segment of the population, including some church districts and things of that nature that are automatically in there. So it is a very rich data set. So we'll be able to do virtually whatever. We'll be able to look at this in as much of a granular format that you would like to see it in, or any
Great.
of us would like to see it.
Great. So the plan is then to have some of these different iterations available at next week's meeting. Is that right?
No, no, I wouldn't say that we're going to have a map available at next week's meeting. What we'll do is do a review of the software and things at next week's meeting and talk about some of that and look at some of the block data and some of those things. That would be the goal by next week.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank
All
you.
right, thank you. Now, why have you, Mr. President? The precinct data, is that only available from the Board of Election Commissioners, or is that fed into this?
Yeah, the current precincts the old precincts will be in the data.
Okay.
After we finish the map, then we will send the whole system over to the election board, and they will draw on top of our map all of the precincts based on what they receive from us.
Okay, all right, thank you. All right, Alderwoman Middlebrook, any questions?
I have no questions. Thank you.
Thank you, dear. Alderwoman Clark Hubbard, any questions? Alderwoman? Maybe she's in the other meeting also. All right. With that, we will be moving forward. If there's any members not on the committee that have questions, I would prefer right now that we email them to me. I'll get you answers, whether it's from myself or other members or Mr. President, and to keep these meetings concise and rolling along, because we're going to be in some long, dragged out meetings later on. My English is not very good. What's the drawn out meetings in a little while. So with that, we will close this meeting. I will excuse any aldermen who are absent for necessary absence, and I move to adjourn. I hear a second.
Second.
With that, we will adjourn the meeting, and we will meet again till next Thursday, which is the 14th at 11 a.m. Thank you very much for attending.